Hello everyone. Welcome to Cloud World. My name is Santiago. So on today's video, we will be continuing the work for the AKS cluster. In this case, we are going to be taking advantage of the federated credential and the managed identity that we created on the previous video to make a special setup in the AKS cluster in this case, and deploy a very quick test application in order to see that the managed identity and the federated credential that we created is actually working as expected. So in order to achieve that, we are going to be mostly doing the whole work into the Kubernetes cluster in this case. So the first thing that we need to do is to create a namespace, and after that we'll be setting up a service account. And we are going to be using the key vault that we created in previous session in order to create a new secret. Once we have everything set up for this case, we are going to move to deploy a custom application that is going to show us that the credential exchange is actually working fine between the managed identity and the AKS cluster with the federated credential in the middle. This application is going to be very simple and is going to retrieve just the secret that we created on the third step and shows that we have the proper capability to access those. So with that in hand, let's get started. So the first thing that we need to make it work in our application, it will be the creation of a namespace, and this is going to be the entry point for all the Kubernetes resources that we are going to be creating for this demo today. So let's dial back a little bit into the managed identity that we created on the last session. So if you remember correctly, we set up this federated credential that is a connection between the managed identity that we have in the Azure portal and also the Kubernetes cluster. So we also had this managed identity, which already have a couple of artifacts already assigned from the previous videos. In this case, we have the key vault secret officers, and we have access to the service bus to be a data sender and a data receivers in this case. For now, we are going to skip working with those, and we are going to concentrate with the key vault. So we also have this key vault instance in here. We are going to be created a secret as well. So going back to the managed identity and the federated credential, if you remember, we set up the federated credential between the managed identity and the AKS cluster, and this is going to act as the middle point for the AKS cluster deployment to exchange tokens with the Azure portal in order to be able to access those applications. There are two very important parameters that we created when doing the configuration for the federated credential in was providing a namespace and a service account. So let's go back into the Kubernetes cluster and take a look into the code. So now the first thing that we need to do is to set up the namespace, and as you can see, we are going to create the namespace with a name Azure Labs. Remember that it's actually pretty important that this name is also matched with the one created here in the federated credential. The same thing happens with the service account. So let's execute this YAML file in order to be able to apply the namespace. So let's go into the console. Right now I'm located in a folder that already contains the files that we are going to be using today. Feel free to explore the Git repository attached to the description in order to get these files and work in your local environment. So let's start with the namespace. So from the previous videos, we explained that we can use the kubectl tooling in order to work with the Kubernetes cluster from our local environment. So once more, we are going to be taking advantage of that. And in this case, we are going to be creating the namespace. So as you can see, we already have the namespace created, and if I can go to the kubectl get ns, and we will be able to see all the namespaces. So we have a few that has been already created, and we also have the one that I just created. In my case, it was previously created, but in case that you just created, it's going to show up that the resource has been created successfully. So now let's move into the service account. Now that we created the namespace, we can move to the service account. So let's take a look into the service account configuration and see what we need to achieve in here. So for the creation of the service account, this is actually going to be pretty simple. We just need to keep two things into consideration. So the first thing is that the kind is going to be service account, and we need to provide the structure exactly as you are seeing on screen right now. So inside the metadata field, we need to provide the annotations field, and inside of it, we need to provide the Azure.workload.identity client ID. On the right, we need to provide the ID of the managed identity that we created on previous videos. In this case, we can remember how to take that value from the Azure CLI. So let's go back into that one. So we can use the AC identity show command in order to retrieve their information, and we just need to provide the name of the managed identity, the resource group where this is actually located, and we are going to request throughout the query to return us the client ID. So this will give you backup with pretty similar to what we're already seeing on the coding either. In this case, I'm showing an empty GUID. In a moment, I'm going to replace this one with the right value, just to keep it safe. Now provide the name of the service account. Of course, this one also need to match the one from the federated credentials, and also you need to make sure that you provide the same namespace for the ownership of the service account of the namespace that you just created. So keep that in mind. The service account that you will be using on your deployment or pod, in this case, needs to belong to the same namespace where the service account is going to be created. So be very wary of that. Otherwise, you will find issues trying to use the managed identity to retrieve permissions from your application. Okay, so let's go back into the terminal very quickly and let's apply these changes. So what we need to do right now is just to apply the YAML file that we already created as well as part of the repository. So once more, we have the service account YAML in this case. Let's just make an apply to the service account and let's create it. Okay, we have everything created so far. So let's take a look into the service accounts. For that, you can use the kubectl command get sa. And you can provide the namespace directly in this command in order to get the service accounts that are created in the namespace. In this case, our namespace is Azure Labs. So as you can see, we have the default that is usually created for each one of the namespaces, and also we have the Azure Lab SA that we just created. So with that in hand, we can move to the next step when we are going to be creating a secret for the secret key vault, and then deploying a very sample application just to retrieve the key and make sure that the managed identity permissions are working as expected. So now let's work with the key vault instance in this case. So we already created a key vault instance in previous videos. In this case was the Azure Labs KV. And we also gave permissions to the managed identity to be able to write secrets and read secrets in this case. So we gave the role of secret officer, which actually provides those proper permission of reading secrets and also writing those. In this case, we will be using just the reader pass for our application. So let's go back into the console, and using the AC key vault secret set, we can create a new key vault. Just provide the name of your key vault instance in here, not the URI, just the name. And now we need to provide the name of the secret and the value we would like to store in that secret. This is pretty simple. So let's execute this command. So as you can see, our key vault secret has been already created, and we got some basic information back from the Azure portal. But if we also go into the browser and we try to explore the secrets in the key vault in here, we will be able to see that we have the new secret created in here. So now let's move into the next part, where we are going to be deploying a very simple pod into the AKS cluster just to access the key vault and retrieve the secret that we just created. So let's take a look. So let's take a look into the configuration file that we need to provide just to create the sample application. So once more, we have a YAML definition in this case, and we are going to be creating a pod. And here it comes the more important pieces that you need to make sure you provide when you are working with managed identities. So the rest of the file mostly is actually everything that you usually create when you create a pod or a deployment in Kubernetes. But the most important pieces that you need to provide is inside the metadata for the pod. You need to provide inside the labels the Azure.workload.identity use, and you need to make sure that you set this one with true. When the Kubernetes cluster detects that your pod or the pods created by your deployment contain this flag, it means that the Kubernetes cluster is going to use the webhook that was created when we enabled the workload identity to exchange tokens with the Azure resources throughout the federated credentials. So just make sure that you provide this value, otherwise it will be unable to work. As part of the spec for the pod, you also need to make sure that you provide the name of the service account, in this case using the service account name value, and provide the name of the service account that we just created on the previous step. Just make sure the name is exactly the same. From here to the bottom is actually a very straightforward application, but in this case we are using a sample application from the Azure repository just to test the managed identity. This Docker image allows you to work with managed identities, but it's not actually required just for the demo today. We are giving just a name to this one just to test the OIDC provider in this case, and we need to provide, at least for this particular container, we need to provide the name of the key vault URL and also the secret name. So in this case, the key vault URL is just the name of your key vault with the HTTPS protocol on top of it, and just .value.azure.net. And for the secret name, we just need to provide the name of the secret that we would like to retrieve. So once we deploy this pod into the AKS cluster, what it's actually going to do automatically is to retrieve that value from the key vault using the managed identity. So let's take a look into the deployment so we can create this deployment. So let's go back into the console. So once more, we will be using the YAML files, and in this case, we will be using the key vault deployment sample. Okay, as you can see, the pod has been created. So let's take a look using the pod sample in this case. Once more, provide the namespace, which in this case is Azure Labs. Okay, we can see we have one pod running in this case, just for a few seconds ago. And if I try to take a look into the logs for this one, we will be able to see that the secret has been retrieved successfully. So just provide the logs, the name of the pod that you would like to explore, and once more, the namespace that we are working on. So as you can see, we have the output in here saying that successfully got the secret. Welcome to our sample app. So far, as you can see, we are building applications where we are not providing any keys or password configuration or anything like that to interact with the Azure resources. So with this final part, we can say for sure that the managed identity and the federated credentials and the AKS cluster are successfully negotiating tokens and credentials in order to access Azure resources. So join me in the next video. We are going to start working with very exciting stuff where we are going to be deploying the consumer and the producer for the service bus to the Azure portal as well using the AKS tooling, and we will start deploying those. So join me in the next video, and thank you for joining me with me. See you in the next one.